For this chapter, we're going to spend our time totally within a photo editor or 2D editor, going over some of the principles of skin creation. Now, this is not going to be a tutorial on how to use a photo editor program, as there are many very good ones out there. There is Photoshop, which I'm using here, as well as Paint Shop, Dog Waffle, and the open source GIMP. All of these apps are very different from each other, but all of them can do the things we're going to look at in this chapter. What I want to focus on is organization and layout, preparing to make the best use of space based on resolutions. What I'm about to go over is one method of creating a skin. Now, this is by no means the only one. You may find all sorts of shortcuts, tricks, and ways of creating skins that I don't cover here, as this is just one very short tutorial. Now, for the purpose of setting some guidelines, I'm going to say that our engine needs our spacefighter to use one single 512 by 512 bitmap and one matching bump map. Some engines can do much more using multiple textures, normal maps, etc., and some can only handle much less. But this is a good benchmark for us to get started with right now. First, you'll see that I've taken each of my original 512 by 512 UV maps that came from GameSpace's UV editor. Now, I've already painted on them, but you'll notice the layers here. If I turn off the backgroundmost layer, you'll see the original wireframe there that came out of Photoshop. You'll also see how all my other layers are organized, including a white layer in the background from which I can draw my bump maps from later. Now, after I have each of these high-res wireframes painted, what I like to do is I like to go in, and I think I'll use this wing as my example. I like to go in and I like to turn off the backgrounds, leaving only these topmost layers exposed. What I do then is actually go in and I do a merge visible right here, which actually combines all of these layers into one layer, which I can now drag onto my master skin here. So what I do is drag that layer over onto this master skin, and now you can see it here. So I'm going to take it, I'm going to scale it down kind of uniformly, and I'm going to drag it to where it belongs on my skin. And you can kind of see there, just from that demonstration, how I've taken my one 512 by 512 high-res texture map painted onto a wireframe, and I've put it onto my master skin. I'm going to delete it here so you can see some of the things I've done. I've done this for every single major piece. Our fin is here, main fuselage is here, these engine fuselages are here, wing is here, our nose cone is here. What I had to do, though, is I went in and I drew a cockpit in. I could actually go into something like GameSpace and actually render out the side view of a ship to get that cockpit. I found some, just, little skull symbol here and drew in some flames, added some special effects. The last real neat trick that I can do is I can create another layer, and let's call this, let's call it highlights. Now what I can do with this layer is I can actually go in, let's pick a nice shade of gray here, and I can actually start to draw in my own little, let's call it three-dimensionality, however you want to call it. That's a little too dark. Let's turn my opacity down. But I can actually start adding shadows right to where they belong on my model. I could do the same thing to add some highlights. I can go in and I can create this layer here that's actually going to fake like highlights and lowlights on my skin to try and create more of a three-dimensional look in the two-dimensional texture. I can make up for a lot of detail doing it this way that I don't want to model because I don't want to waste the polygons. So you can see how I've added a couple extra layers right here. This is for my gun barrels, which I didn't actually model or skin out of GameSpace. And I created some yellow here for which to paint like my missile tips, and even to use within my like the grooves of my engines to show where the engine glow will be. And you can see how I only have one fin, even though our spaceship actually has more than one fin. I'm going to reuse a lot of the space on this texture on the other fins to make the best use of my space. I've also left a little blank area here. There would be little miscellaneous parts of the ship that might require the hull texture without any additional detail, so I've left a little space to kind of place the UV maps for that there. Now I'm ready to save this out, to do a save as, and we're going to save this as a bitmap, and we'll call this my Avenger skin. Now this bitmap is what I'm going to take back in to gamespace in our next chapter, and this will all start to make a lot more sense once you actually see me take this skin file, take our Avenger ship's UV maps, and actually align them where they go on this skin to really create a nice looking starfighter.